I got a question for you. How confident are you in the resilience of you, your tribe, and your community if a catastrophic event occurred right now?
Warning. This is not a test. The following message has been transmitted at the request of the United States government. Important instructions vital to your safety will follow. A nuclear attack has commenced against multiple military bases across Europe and the United States. Multiple intercontinental ballistic missiles are currently being tracked, with potential targets being major population areas across North America and Europe. They will reach their targets within the next 10-15 minutes.
Now picture this. The emergency broadcast system blares out simultaneously on all of your electronic devices, signaling a nationwide disaster. There's no hope for external aid, and it's very likely that help is never coming. How soon will it be before your city descends into chaos and lies in ruins? Or would your community come together and cooperate? Recently, I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Bradley Garrett, the author of the book Bunker. The book is a profound ethnographic exploration into preparedness and subterranean living. I highly recommend reading the book, as it offers probably the most comprehensive analysis of prepping culture to date. However, I must respectfully disagree with Dr. Garrett's optimism regarding post-disaster cooperation. Today I'll present several reasons why Western societies face more conflict and competition than their Eastern counterparts in the aftermath of collapse. Consider the Gaza Strip, for example. You have people who are living under constant bombardment, on the brink of starvation. And despite all of its challenges, we're not witnessing widespread lawlessness, marauding gangs, or cannibalism. If there ever was a place where you think you would be witnessing the acting out of all of the horrors of post-apocalyptic Hollywood fiction, you think it would be in this place. But in fact, quite the opposite is true. People are cooperating. People are helping one another. The question is, would the same be true if something similar happened here? I believe that if such a catastrophe struck closer to home, the outcome would be starkly different for the following reasons. One of the main reasons why I think a descent into lawlessness and competition is likely is because we've been inculcated with an aversion to pain in this society. Let me explain. The amenities that technology has adorned us with here in the West have enriched our lives immensely, but at a cost. Our ability to endure the rigors of a real survival situation have diminished greatly. People have an aversion to any sort of painful situation. If something's broke, you go and buy a new one. If something hurts, you take a painkiller. If something seems difficult, you find an easier way. Our diverse marketplace affords us a range of possible solutions to deal with any micro-crisis that arises in our lives. Usually this comes at a relatively low cost. But what happens when that's not an option? For many people, pain, and more precisely, deprivation, are going to be completely foreign experiences. Let me ask you a question. What's the longest you've ever went without food? Have you ever truly been starving before? Have you ever been so thirsty that you would do anything for a glass of water? Have you ever been so cold that you thought you might die? Or have you ever been in a stressful situation where your life has been at risk? For the better part of the Western world, the answer is no. But for billions of people around the world, this is an everyday experience. They're going to be more adapted to endure a post-collapse environment. Similarly, most people in our world are not accustomed to experiencing the emotion that is called fear. We don't need to be fearful. We have the police. We have security systems. We have numerous protective measures in place to insulate us from the dangers of the world. And for the rare few who do experience real trauma in the West, oftentimes they become stricken with what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. But there are many places in the world where having such a clinical psychiatric diagnosis is a luxury. For many people around the world, their life is a constant state of trauma. There is no such thing as post-traumatic stress disorder. The next issue is our aging population. A healthy population pyramid is in the shape of a pyramid. You have more young people than you do old people. That means you have more people that can contribute to the economy, pay taxes, and if need be, fight wars. The greater the population of elderly and infirm people within our society, the more dependent they're going to be on a grid that likely won't be there after disaster strikes. Now, the older generations are arguably more resourceful, are more in control of their emotions, and this might actually be a mitigating factor when it comes to minimizing chaos in a post-collapse environment. However, I envision that in a grid-down world, an agrarian lifestyle will be adopted. That is, without machines, without energy and technology, manual labor is going to be required to fulfill all of our everyday needs. For this, you're going to need young, strong people in order to work. Also, younger people are more resilient to medical problems, and they have more neuroplasticity, meaning that they're more likely to be able to adapt to this new post-collapse world. People who are over the hill, who've only known things the way that they currently are, will have a more difficult time adapting to this post-disaster world. Technological dependence. In the current day and age, we've offloaded many of the things that we used to be responsible for as individuals to the government and society as a whole. Our society has fostered a very diverse set of specialized skill sets that we can call up in a moment's notice to perform a task, so we don't have to learn how to do that very thing ourselves. We are the farthest thing from a do-it-yourself society. The grid has empowered us beyond our wildest dreams. The availability of cheap, accessible energy has enabled even those in the most bottom rung of the socioeconomic ladder relatively extravagant and comfortable lifestyles. As such, the grid has been a force multiplier for all of us. But when the lights go out, all of that responsibility that we've offloaded to the grid falls back on us. And most people don't have the skills or capabilities required to meet the needs of their everyday lives. Next up is pharmaceutical dependency. Many people are addicted to chronic medications and even mental health medications. And as necessary as many of these things are, in their absence, many people are simply not going to make it. The collapse of global trade and the just-in-time delivery system is going to greatly reduce the availability of the medications that people need to either stay alive or maintain their sanity. There is a much higher proportion of people on these types of medications in our world than there are in other societies. Many of these chronic ailments are beyond the realm of personal control, but some are the result of poor lifestyle choices. The abundance of cheap energy and the decadence of our modern world have permitted us to live these self-defeating lifestyles while masking the effects and keeping us propped up with these pharmaceutical interventions. When these go away, a lot of people are simply not going to make it or lose their minds. In addition to these physical ailments, many people struggle with addictions in our society. The reasons why are numerous. Many of these addictions are chemical, but some are called process addictions. Addictions to our phones, addictions to video games, addictions to gambling. In the breakdown of the supply chain and the absence of the grid, these addictions will become unsustainable. And as a result, many people are going to be forced into a state of acute withdrawal. Now, for some, that might be viewed as a mixed blessing, the excuse that they need to finally get their act together. For others, this is going to come as a shock, and they will continue to fight tooth and nail to the bitter end to make sure that they can get their fix. And it won't matter at whose expense, thus fueling the chaos even more. Here in the West, we also struggle with something I call selfishness. Slightly different, but very similar to selfishness. We are so self-absorbed and narcissistic, and you could argue that this is the result of having no tribe, having no nuclear family, having no immediate community. So we all have to vie for likes on social media. The individualistic nature of our world and the free market society that it accommodates is far different from the collectivist worlds of the East. While this individualist model has helped us thrive and excel in a world of cheap energy and abundant resources, when times get tough, collectivist and authoritarian societies tend to prevail. Those societies that are accustomed to working together with one another, those societies tend to thrive in hard times. But if the competitive nature of our free market system is any indicator, in our world, it's going to be dog eat dog when the crap hits the fan. I would venture to say that many people are also very neurotic, repressed, and lack any degree of emotional maturity in our society. There was a time when you had to come to terms with your emotions, where you had to speak face to face with people. Those days are over. Many people nowadays cannot deal with the slightest inconvenience, microaggression, or stress that is levied against them. Take, for example, road rage. Everything can be going fine in a person's life, relatively speaking. They have a roof over their heads, they have food in the fridge, and they're healthy. So why then do some people completely flip out during rush hour? There's an element of passive aggressiveness that permeates all of our society. This is due to our lack of stress inoculation. Because we're not accustomed to experiencing any stress in our lives, the slightest little bit of it sets us off. We are easily triggered by the smallest, most insignificant of things. And amongst most people, particularly the young nowadays, there's a dearth of self-awareness. Perhaps this is why self-help is a fundamentally Western concept. Another reason all hell is going to break loose is urbanization. Here in the more technologically sophisticated West, there's a greater proportion of people who are urbanized. The majority of people have no agrarian skills and are wholly dependent on the giant incubators that are the cities. Without the elaborate supply chains pumping these cities full of supplies, services, and resources on a day-to-day basis, millions of people will instantly become scavengers. Conversely, societies that are predominantly rural and collectivists on top of it have retained the skills vital to the sustenance of life. As our society becomes more sophisticated, it also becomes more centralized and monopolized. Our critical infrastructures become more hardwired and intertwined. One failure in one part of the system can cascade to other parts of the system. Again, this creates efficiency in the best of times. But when the chips are down, things quickly fall apart. And as the saying goes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. A great example of this is the North American power grid. The vulnerability of the grid is in its interconnectedness. There are thousands of transformers that regulate the distribution of electricity throughout the North American power grid. But if you take out just a few dozen of the right transformers, that entire grid can collapse. The same is true for all other types of critical infrastructure, whether it's natural gas, water, telecommunications. These privileges become Achilles' heels and weaknesses in times of collapse. Take North Korea, for example. Satellite shots taken at night of North Korea show that most of the population there functions with just a few hours of power rationed every day. And then you look to the south, where their energy demands are almost 25 times that of their northern counterparts. Now, when the lights are on, the south is going to prevail. But you tell me who's going to be better suited to ride out the end of days. North Korea or South Korea? A society who's accustomed to living in the dark, or one who is accustomed to having everything they want at the snap of a finger? The next thing is the erosion of the nuclear family. In many societies, it's customary for the extended family to live inside the same home as the nuclear family. Not only is it no longer customary for us to have our elder generation in the home, the nuclear family is quickly going away as well. People are increasingly more isolated and compartmentalized into their own individual condos. In the future, they're going to be called pods, I'm told, because it's the only thing you're probably going to be able to afford. The people who are able to sustain a nuclear family long term tend to not have as many children anymore. The size of our tribes is shrinking, and we're becoming more individuated. This only increases the likelihood of competition versus cooperation. One of the strengths in our free market capitalist society is the diversity of people and ideas. In an era of cheap energy and abundance, diversity is most certainly a strength. This has enabled us to be innovative and creative in ways that other societies cannot replicate. As much as this panoply of diverse insights has contributed to exponential progress and growth over the last 50 years, in times of austerity, it's arguable that a more homogeneous society is going to prevail. As great as our differences are, and as much as we embrace them, it becomes harder to have social cohesion when you have people who are speaking different languages, who come from different cultures and worship different gods. In fact, it's very likely that things are going to get tribal after collapse. Take a look at prisons, for example. We all know that prisons tend to align themselves along racial lines. Now, is this just a result of the general degenerate nature of inmates? It's possible, but it could also be a microcosm of how society is going to reorganize itself after the collapse. Now, this is going to vary a lot from one city to another. Some places are very well integrated, others are quite segregated, naturally and voluntarily. Another reason why we're not going to make it here is because our world is so sanitized. In addition to being averse to pain, many people have simply not understood what it means to not take a bath for a few days. Our physiology is not accustomed to living in anything but a overly sanitized environment, where chemicals, air filters, and various prophylactics insulate us from the toxins, bacteria, and viruses present in the environment. Take a person from any well-to-do neighborhood in North America, send them to a developing country, where the water is not purified as well, where people there have adapted a physiology that's able to endure such a biologically stressful environment. We would not fare too well. Here in the West, we've enjoyed what's called a service-based economy. We've enjoyed the luxury of offloading a lot of our manufacturing and even resource material extraction to other countries. And as a result of this, we don't have the industrial capacity required to provide for ourselves. It would take years, if not decades, to build it out. Perhaps this is the true meaning of that old saying, the last will be first. For all the reasons I've mentioned, in an unprecedented, nationwide disaster where help is not coming, the outcome is going to be far worse in what's commonly referred to as the developed world. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Canadian Prepper out.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.